Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Us Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Dave. Thanks for asking.
Excellent, excellent. We'd like to welcome our viewers and listeners to another episode of the Journeys of Us Ordinary People podcast, the personal, professional, and career development podcast. And for those of you that are viewing, you'll see that we have a guest speaker with us this week. It's become a very common trend and theme with us lately, hopefully for the foreseeable future. And along with us today is Melissa Janowski. How are you doing today, Melissa?
I'm good. How are you?
Most excellent. Most excellent. Glad to have you here. Uh, as we get started, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I joined the Army back in 2001. I was fresh out of high school. It was actually 2000 when I joined, but I went to basic training in January of 2001. And then 24 years later, I retired. So I officially retired like a week ago, a week today, actually.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Congratulations.
so I am newly retired after 24 years. Um, Within my career, I've done a lot of stuff, military police, flight operations. I was an instructor, a recruiter, a drill instructor. So I had a interesting career. I got to do a lot of really great things, and I actually retired in the DC area. So my last duty station was DC. So I've got to participate in some really cool events like the last few inaugurations.
Wow.
Um, and during my career, I faced a lot of challenges, but I'm happy to say that I made it on the other end and have been an example for my daughter. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
That's great.
Well,
Wow.
thank you for your service. I mean, Joe and I are big fans as veterans, so and we understand some of the challenges that are out there. So we appreciate you joining us today and sharing that with us. And with that, our topic for today is resiliency as women. And for our guests that are viewing and listening, obviously Joe and I are not in that category. So hence Melissa is here to share her wisdom with us. So Melissa, let's talk about resiliency as women. What are your thoughts on that?
um, you know, as women, resiliency definitely looks different for us, whether it is in the military or in leadership roles. Women typically face just different challenges. Um, Especially really in the military, it's a different atmosphere. Women are constantly up against, well, I mean, really, the majority of the military is still men.
Yeah.
So um, promotion, leadership roles, really, leadership, because women have this fine line that they have to walk on, being too soft or being too hard. Um, and I think it just takes a lot of resilience to walk that line and to be okay with not everybody um, being supportive of us being in roles, senior roles, and again, especially in the military because it's still a male dominated field.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Go ahead,
I,
Joe. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to jump in there. My last role, my last military role was at that high level where, like you say, there were very few women in those leadership roles. And you're right. Even some of the conversations that we had around the room, with the senior staff, it, it was a different conversation for women. It really was. And you're right. Those conversations were, well, will this person be able to do this? And all those things that they were asking never were asked about men. And so I can relate to exactly what you're saying as far as women are held to different standards because again, it is still a male dominant organization. And so, yeah, I can definitely see or hear. And that was some of the challenges I faced as a senior leader, trying to help women get to the next level. And I was fortunate enough to have support in, my hierarchy, that we were able to make some changes that were positively impacted women. So hopefully we will continue that trend or that theme, because it is definitely needed. But I know the conversations that are being had, like you said, Melissa, and it's unfortunate that we're again where we are today, and we still have those type of conversations.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
several of our colleagues, Joe and I have had other women on the podcast with similar stories, or just um, examples of the challenges. To your point, being too hard or being too soft. It's like that. That to me is not even a fine line. That's walking on eggshells every day, trying to fit in every day instead of just being able to say, "Hey, I'm part of the group. I'm part of the team. Let's get along. Everything's great." It's like every day is a new. It's like you start over almost every day, and that is an uncomfortable situation to be in, especially for as long as you were in your military career.
Yeah, women, when I stepped into my last position was a first sergeant of the 74th Troop Command in DC, the HHC, so headquarters. But, when women step into those roles, we we have to prove ourselves, and that's much different than a man stepping into the role. He's kind of stepping into the role already expected to do great things, and women, it's we're expected to do great things, but it's I don't know, it's just different. It's well, let's see, let's wait and
Right.
see if she'll meet our expectations. So hopefully, I'd like to see, as the next couple decades, that we have more women, just in the military, um, and in those leadership positions, and mentoring our junior female soldiers to be resilient um, through every aspect of their career, not just leadership. Women, even in deployments, that's a different ball game for women as well, and you have to be extremely resilient in those atmospheres, because it's very I want to say "huh," but now that I'm retired, I'm telling myself, don't say "huh" anymore. um they're just very macho, right? Deployments
Yeah.
are very so yeah, it's just different for us.
So let's talk about some of the you mentioned deployments, and you alluded to other areas. So let's talk about some of those other areas where women need to be resilient in the military, or in leadership positions in other organizations. So you allude to military deployments. So that would be, to me, in the civilian side, a person that's traveling a lot,
Hmm.
going on, just a road warrior, basically, except in the military, it's not for days or weeks, it's for months on end sometimes. So what are some of the other areas in the military where women have to be resilient?
um Outside of leadership, um really every aspect. I mean, if you think about it, women in the military at any rank, it could be, specialists, the lower enlisted. Um, um, One of the differences is women are typically the ones that are raising families. So you have an active duty soldier who is in the military, and they're expected to balance that home work life. Um, and that in itself takes a lot of resiliency, because raising kids is not easy. And doing that while you're full time in the military is not easy. Most women are also continuing their education, at least most that I've worked with. So the balancing is is home life with your kids and your spouse and your responsibilities in the military, whether you're deployed or not. Um, and so that in itself takes a lot of resilience. Deployments. I myself had an experience during deployment that really led me to the path of where I'm at today. And um, I was sexually assaulted while overseas. And unfortunately, that happens a lot overseas. So, you know, boy, we want to talk about resiliency. Having a female soldier go through something like that, or even a harassment, sexual harassment, and then have to work with that person every day for months until they're back home station. A lot of the times overseas, things like that are handled differently because they are overseas. It's a little bit more difficult. Um, so really just like I said, the amount of resilience it takes to continue to work and work at a high level while dealing with that and having to see that person every day is extremely difficult. And that kind of, that really pushed me to, I got my master's degree in nonprofit management because I wanted to go into the nonprofit field and help soldiers. Um, and I was lucky enough to do that straight out of retirement, actually before I retired. Um, and I became the executive director for a nonprofit that helps military connected survivors of sexual assault. Um, so working with those women, those survivors, I see a tremendous amount of resiliency. Um, it takes resiliency to go through any type of trauma, male or female, but um, being violated like that and not being able to, not losing control and still trying to make it through everyday tasks. Um, Resiliency probably isn't even a strong enough word.
Wow, Melissa, I want to commend you for sharing. That in itself took resiliency to be able to just share at a very high level your experience and you know, wow, you lived through something that no one should ever have to go through. Let me just put that out there to our audience. That unfortunately, like you said, it does happen both to men and women, and the resiliency piece is absolutely paramount. And when you can't escape that environment, that makes it even more challenging. And I can empathize and sympathize with that to a degree. And yeah, it is challenging. It's not can be, it is. There's no two ways about it. And to go on and find your purpose on working for a nonprofit to help others that have experienced those things, that to me is above and beyond. I mean, that is someone who has been through a lot that says, hey, I've been through it, I get it, and I'm going to do something about it. And that is just absolutely beautiful. I mean, that is pure love right there in the most pure sense.
I don't want anybody else to have to. It's really, before I even say, obviously, I would love to just wave a magic wand and have sexual assault and harassment not even be a factor in the military. Um, but it's really, it's been quite healing for me to help others that have gone through the same thing. And before I left the military and became the executive director for Glass Soldier, I became a victim advocate. And so I've been a victim advocate for the military, now also for civilian, but for about a decade. And working with other survivors has been it's difficult because it brings up a lot of my own emotions, but it's also been very healing for me to help others. And I think um, that was just my path um, to help others that are still in and are still dealing with it. Whether it's lending an ear or just helping them navigate through the process.
Yeah. And you mentioned Glass Soldier. Would you like to take a couple moments to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, like I said, Glass Soldier is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. The nonprofit is based out of Texas, but the founder and I are in the DMV area. So the founder, Dr. Poe, she lives in Maryland, and I'm in Virginia. So the majority of the in-person work we do is here within the DMV area, but we help soldiers obviously nationwide. It doesn't matter where they're stationed. So, but as I said, we help military connected survivors of sexual trauma. So, military connected is not just active duty, it's also veterans and their spouses, children, anybody who is listed as a dependent. Um, so, and then we offer education to leadership. So we travel to different bases and teach um, how to prevent sexual assault and sexual harassment within their ranks. So we're teaching other leaders how to recognize it, how to see it, how to notice it, how to stop it, how to prevent it, all of the above. We also have workshops every month, and those workshops cover a wide variety of topics. So, PTSD, we did emotional spending because emotional spending is a trauma response. Um, which is crazy because I didn't know before we taught this class that it was a trauma response, and I'm like, okay, so maybe I should not go on shopping sprees anymore. um,
I, I think that's a great way to deal with things myself.
you know what? I don't disagree, actually. um, Um, so, and then we also, well, right now we're working on, we'd like to have a conference, this year for survivors. So that is, an MST conference that we'd like to have at the end of the year. And then, we're a small nonprofit, so we're still, growing. We only have, two full-time employees and a handful of volunteers, but um, just the work that we do is so important to us. It doesn't matter if we reach one person and help one person, or we reach 1,000 and help all thousand. It That one is enough. But that's a little bit about Glass Soldier. Um, it's a wonderful organization, and I still can't believe that um, I was able to walk into that position right out of retirement. It's an absolute blessing.
Wow. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. That's much needed, and again, sharing your story and helping other people. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we appreciate, the your candor and transparency. I mean, our we talked to our guests before the show, and sharing what you're comfortable with, and the fact that you shared that is just it's overwhelming. I mean, my heart is just aching for you and everyone else that has had to go through those types of experiences. And, unfortunately, I don't know about Joe, but I've observed and been aware of things like that have happened in the military and civilian side of things. And you're absolutely right. That is something that is absolutely unacceptable and should never happen. But on the other side of things, when we come through those types of experiences, knowing that there's others that have experienced that, those types of situations can be empowering both for the counselor and the victim, and oftentimes the counselors are victims themselves. And there is some purpose that can be found in those types of situations. And to your point, it is in the past, but that doesn't mean it's still not there, and that we're still not dealing with those things. And sometimes those things are more frequently revisited, not because of our own choice, and other times we can kind of pack those things away a little bit. And just knowing that there's a community and interest support out there is huge. And we want to let our audience know, if you've been a victim of any form of sexual assault or sexual harassment, you're in the military, you're dependent, please reach out to Melissa's organization or any other organization through the VA. You're not alone. There are many others that unfortunately have been through what you've gone through, and we're here to support you in any way we can. Um, yeah, it's just, like I said, my heart aches for you, because and all the others, because you know unfortunately, I don't want to say it's a reflection on society, but it kind of is, on the temperament of what's allowed to happen or tolerated. And yeah. So let's kind of bring this back to a positive spin. So through certain types of trauma, we can find purpose. We can find ourselves. We can find the positive in things. And I believe that's an important part of life and personal, professional, and career development. I mean, when you can find something, find your purpose, that is huge. And the fact that you're able to find your purpose while you transitioned out of the military, that's a bonus. And
Yeah.
and the fact that you've been advocating for so long, I mean, and helping people for so many years, that is hugely commendable. I mean, I wish there was an award for something like that. Maybe Joe and I will come up with one. I don't know. They, helping others is a big award. Give back. That's really what the podcast is about: is sharing, not necessarily going through the triggering details, but just sharing with other people to let them know that they're not alone, and
Yeah.
sharing their stories, the good, the bad, the successes, how we've dealt with things, how we've overcome these things, and what we've done with what we've learned, and how we've applied that and turned it into a positive use of our energy, instead of you know letting it take our power away, us taking the power back for ourselves.
Yeah. And resiliency, no matter what you've been through, male, female, it's really, it's about showing up every day, right? And to me, that's really what resiliency is showing up every day, celebrating the small wins, because we don't always get big wins, but the small ones are just as important, and working through whatever adversity we've been through.
Yeah, and Joe and I've talked about this many times offline. As long as you're moving forward, you're still moving. And
Yep.
that's the important thing. Whether it's with a podcast, whether it's with your job, your personal life, your professional life, your career, your education, your life experiences, as long as you're moving forward, you're still moving. And that's one of the things that Joe and I stress repeatedly is, you got to move forward. You got to keep pushing forward. You got to keep moving, and
Yeah.
that's just such a huge piece.
And finding a support group, right? No matter, like I said, no matter what we've been through, um, there's people out there that have been through the same thing, and finding support groups, and just knowing that you're not alone
Yeah.
is also extremely important. Yeah.
We have a
I do
nice.
have
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I do have a question, Melissa. If people are not ready to reach out to a community or to other people, what are some of the things they can do for themselves that might, help them, you know, move forward? I mean, what are some of those things, or maybe one or two things that they can do to maybe start to spin a positive light on, where they can go or where they can end up?
I'm a big advocate of self-care. So whether that's one day a week or every night could be self-care. Self-care could be binging, your favorite
Mhm.
Netflix show.
Yeah.
Um, so for those that aren't ready to reach out and taking care of yourself is extremely important. Doing small things that make you happy or relax you. Um, that could be a bath, could be, um, some women, we like to pamper ourselves. So a mask and doing our nails or, um, anything like that.
Okay.
I know guys don't do that, but like I said, it could be going out to the garage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And whatever it is that makes you happy, finding those little pieces of joy.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's kind of in alignment with what Dave said about what we try and help people with. Is it's just sometimes it may be difficult just to get out of bed, but if you can
Yeah.
put that one, foot on the floor and then take a
Yep.
step, stand up. I mean, that's as even if that's all you do for that day, you've made a step forward. So it's just to
Yes.
help people recognize some of those small victories that you're taking to, again, hopefully come out on the other side in a positive
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah,
got to
and
just keep moving forward.
yeah, and those small wins, those are purely subjective. I mean, to Joe's point, it could just be putting that first foot on the floor in the morning. It could just be waking up and taking your first breath. That might be all you can do in that moment. So,
Yeah.
to our audience, these small wins, don't have to be, oh, I ran 5 miles today. Although if you're a marathoner, maybe that is a small win. But remember, if it's a small win to you, then it's a small win, or it's a
It's
win, period.
significant. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got about 2 minutes left or so. What are your final thoughts on resiliency as women? This has been a very, very powerful episode. I would say one of our most powerful episodes. What are some of your final thoughts on resiliency as women?
It's about strategy, adaptability, and perseverance. Um, we keep saying just pushing through. Um, yes, pushing through, moving forward, but we don't always have to push through. I think that's really important to say is that we can take the time to go speak with somebody. Um, and I've already said it once, but it is extremely important for people to know they're not alone, and especially women, right? There's just finding that group, even if it's a small group of women that you work with, to just be able to have other people to connect with and people who understand what we're going through. So, like I said, it's perseverance, um, um, and just finding our people is important.
Absolutely. Joe, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank Melissa for coming on the podcast and again sharing her story and again the work she's doing to help other people to overcome some of the things that have happened in their lives. So I really appreciate it and appreciate you for everything you're doing. And so thanks for again sharing your story. That's like Dave said. It's I'm at a loss of words just because again it still happens too often, and so just to continue to hear it, it does make the heart ache. So again, thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm just going to echo what Joe said. Thank you so much for sharing your story, um, being available to us, having a level of transparency on such a challenging topic. And yeah, yeah, I'm at a loss for words too. And Joe knows that hardly ever happens. So, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap the show up. Again, thank you so much, Melissa. You're doing great work. Please keep doing what you're doing. For our audience, if you've experienced this sort of trauma or know someone that has, please reach out to Melissa and her team at Glass Soldier, or anyone else that you feel comfortable reaching out to. There are plenty of support networks out there. When you're ready, please do that. And for our viewers and listeners, thank you again for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. And yeah, thanks for just joining us again. We have more guest speakers in the coming weeks and months with more great stories. And we hope you're getting something great out of this. And if you like it, great. If you don't, well, hopefully you do. I mean, hopefully there's no not liking it. And like, share, subscribe. We're on, all the platforms. So until next time, we want you to keep on being your not so ordinary you.